Well, the lighting isn't brilliant. Or perhaps it is. I've been listening to quite a bit of David Icke today, and gosh, I like this man more and more. I realise I'm a bit late catching up. Probably because I didn't want to be accused of having taken my ideas from David Icke. And I haven't. I've done my own research. I do like the places where my research gels with his. And I have to say, he's been looking at the macrocosm, whereas I've been looking at the microcosm of my family, for the most part, and then my extended family, and then finding out exactly where my extended family were going to, which is where we are at. Which is, I'm sorry, the Nazi ideal. And also, as I did say on another video, the Illuminati ideal. They both gel at crucial points. Not all of them. My Nazi extended family wanted exactly what is happening now. Well, that's one thing. And it's not at all what I was about to say. I was going to bring it back to the personal. Because David Icke is just saying in an interview I've just watched from this year, and is it me or does he look ill? Not that I can talk, but does he look ill? Perhaps they're getting to him after all. He was talking about the addiction to smartphones, etc., to the media, which I was talking about on a video the other day. And I was thinking to myself, blast it, they've had me for 4.5 years. I have this addiction to technology, and I only had the internet installed on the laptop here in December just gone, just 3 months ago. I'd resisted it very, very much until then, and I wanted to Skype, and it was the only way I could Skype. I'd had the internet on a phone since approximately September 2011. And just for the hell of it, I joined up with Facebook to see what was going on there and what it was all about, and whether it could explain to me whether our government had turned into a fascist dictatorship or a communist dictatorship. Only to find out. Of course, it makes no difference which it is, it's all one. But I was right, it is a dictatorship now. Look around. We have thought police. We are told what we may think and what we may not think. And maybe be punished for what we think, if we're daft enough to express it, our thoughts. Well, this is not new to me, of course. It's been going on with me since my childhood, because I had a Nazi father. It's horrific to me because it's happening again. And I thought, well, okay, 4.5 years on FB, I'm actually losing interest in it to a huge, huge extent. I'm tired of the trolls, and I'm tired of the groups, and yesterday I left a Greenpeace group, which I'd been with because I'm interested in the environment, but they've gone left of left of left to some impossible place I do not understand and cannot understand and don't want to understand. Today I left a UKIP group because when I tried to be realistic, I got all this shit about being a pessimist. Well, I'm sorry, but I don't think UKIP is ever going to get in. And hey, it came up on this interview. Here's where we're heading, not just our little British Isles, America to Australia to, we're heading towards martial law. So David Cameron will be laughing on the other side of his face, but it won't be any benefit to any of us who are left behind, and I'm beginning to be quite glad that the next term that awaits me is called a coffin. On the plus side for me, my addictions generally last about 5 years. I had approximately 5 years, I don't know, I'd worked it out at one time, 70 to 75, my OCD was at its worst, and the self-harm, and all of that, everything that went with that. 75 to 80, my anorexia stroke bulimia, that was at its worst. I think 80 to 85, alcoholism was at its worst. Got over just about all of that, enough to make my life manageable anyway. Still a lot of claustrophobia and a touch of agoraphobia. Can't get rid of it even when you know your time on earth is running out and you happen to love the beauty of the world. As I do, personally. So, I think at 4.5 years into FB, if I'm still alive in 6 months' time, I will be well and truly off it. Unfortunately, it's currently the only way that I can communicate with my brother. But I'm not sure I want to be here in 6 months anyway. So some of this is still the microcosm, the personal, and some of this is the macrocosm. I think they've got it. I think martial law is coming. I think radical Islam has been introduced into our midst very deliberately. Into, as far as the British Isles are concerned, islands that were very definitely not in the not so distant past Christian. Yes, we've been turning more and more towards atheism in the last 50 years or so. Actually, not that long, 40 perhaps. As I say, I left school in 1970, and I was a minority of one as an atheist. Mind you, I must confess, in that same school, in a video I didn't upload, I thought, oh God, I can't upload this. There were no black children either. I don't actually know when Southampton first had a black population. Don't know. Because I was living on the white side of town. You know, there's no point in denying that. I was living in the white suburbs. They were all white. And the population I did first become aware of was both in Indian and Pakistani. And they crowded into an area not so very far from the red light districts, all crowded into one area. In other words, the part of town nobody else wanted to live in at the time, not many people anyway. And I have to say that the Indians, who are largely not Islamic, Hindu, I think, certainly in Southampton, mainly, and the Pakistanis who are Islamic, I never heard of any trouble between them, none at all. And even as recently as when I left Southampton 12 years ago, Indians and Pakistanis were living next door to each other and saying rude things about each other behind one another's backs, but there was no trouble. And there were no burqas, I have to say. There was no radical Islam in Southampton. And if I'm totally honest, I've already said I had numerous reasons for leaving Southampton. One of them was our entry into Iraq, our illegal war in Iraq, because it was perfectly obvious to a blind man that not only were we going to go into Iraq and murder a lot of innocent people, but that we would create an enemy already in our midst, i.e. that the people who had been living reasonably harmoniously in our midst up until that point would turn against us for killing other people of their religion, and they have. So I'm seeing that nightmare come true. Sounds good, doesn't it? Oh, I can see this is coming, so I'm going to go to Wales and save my own skin. Well, I had just been raped by an Islamic man who practiced taqiyya, i.e. the acceptable lying, and who told me that he didn't smoke, didn't drink, and wasn't allowed to have sex outside marriage. So perhaps a touch of the more radical Islam had entered England at that point. And perhaps that was what alerted me to how bad things could become, especially for women and children, after we had invaded Iraq illegally. So I kind of sit on the fence here because I can see that you are going to be extremely aggrieved, to put it mildly, if you've seen your family and friends and loved ones dying under attack from Britain and America for absolutely no reason whatsoever, because they did not have weapons of mass destruction. They didn't have them. I think most of us knew that they didn't have them. I was joining sit-down protests outside the Civic Centre in Southampton, not in my name, not to enter Iraq. But I do have to admit to the fact that that was a double-edged sword for me, as I've just said. It wasn't only that we were going there to kill innocent people, it was that we already had a Trojan horse in our midst that only had to be radicalized by our going into Iraq. I know I'm saying things that other people have said before now, which is why I generally stick to the microcosm of my life, which is a story I wanted to tell before I die. There's not much point in stepping on other people's toes and repeating what other people have already said. Bottom line, two of them actually, that I'm picking up from the interview I've just watched. One, try and avoid technology, although this is, for some of us, the only way we can really communicate now. If we're more or less housebound, it's a good way to communicate. But it's controlling us. So, ideally, switch off the technology, everyone, and prepare yourself for martial law. And you might not be so glad to see Cameron go, and the rest of his vile government, when the military are controlling us all instead. Not that I don't want rid of Cameron, but I don't think Jeremy Corbyn is ever going to get in. I think democracy is over.